This is Geometry Unit 9. This is the review for quiz number 1. We're talking about slope, midpoint, and distance. The slope formula, we typically call it y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Recognize that y's are definitely on top. The x's would be in the denominator. The midpoint formula. That is the average of the x's, comma, the average of the y's. So you add your two x's together, divided by 2. You add your two y's together, divided by 2. The distance formula. Here you're going to subtract your x's, square it, add it to your y values subtracted, and take the square root. So you're going to need to know what the formula is for your quiz. So we'll practice some of these with numbers. Find the slope. So we have the slope formula. So here's your x1, y1, x2, y2. So the slope is going to equal 7 minus 2, negative 3 minus 1, (5 over a negative 4). x1, y1, x2, y2, using our slope formula. 5 minus 5, 10 minus a negative 4. 5 minus 5 is 0, over 10 plus 4, which comes out to be 14. Well, 0 over any number other than 0 is going to be 0. We're going to look at our lines. We have two lines. These are points that are on that line. We're going to decide if these two lines are parallel. If they're parallel, they're going to have the same slope. If they're perpendicular, they're going to have opposite reciprocals. And if it's neither, they'll have different slopes. And if the slopes are different, that means the lines definitely intersect, but they're not necessarily perpendicular. They're not perpendicular. So for a line number 1, we're going to need to look at the slope. So we have x1, y1, x2, y2. So 5 minus 3 and negative 1 minus a negative 5 gives us 2 over negative 1 plus 5 is 4. That comes out to be 1/2. So then we're going to look at line number 2, and that would be 6 minus 0 and 15 minus 3. That is 6 over 12, which is also 1/2. So since the lines have the same slope, we know that they're going to be parallel. For question letter B, line number 1, we have 3 minus 1 and 3 minus 0. That's 2/3. Line number 2, 4 minus 1 0 minus 2. That's 3, negative 2. So if you notice, those slopes, one of them's positive slope, one of them's a negative slope, and the fractions are flips of each other. So we call that opposite reciprocal. So we know that they're perpendicular slopes, or actually perpendicular lines. And then with our last example, we have 2 minus 3 and negative 5 minus a negative 2. That gives us negative 1 over negative 3, which is 1/3. Two negatives, when you're dividing them, become a positive. 3 minus 1, 5 minus 4 gives you 2 over 1. Okay, these are different. So it's neither parallel or perpendicular. We're going to write an equation of a line given these 2 points. So we need to know the actual line. We need to know the equation y equals mx plus b with the correct values plugged in for it, the slope and the y-intercept. x1, y1, x2, y2. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're getting a slope of negative 1/2. So if that's your slope, we're now going to pick one of the points. We're going to use it in our y equals mx plus b. So we'll plug the 4, our slope, the x plus b. 2 negatives make a positive when you're multiplying. Half of 2 is 1, so that's going to be a positive 1. Subtract the 1 across. So the slope is going to be negative 1/2, and the y-intercept is going to be 3. x1, y1, x2, y2. So our slope, negative 1 minus 5, 1 minus a negative 1. That gives us a slope of negative 3. So we're going to take a point, which is 5, a slope of negative 3, our x value of negative 1. 2 negatives make a positive when you're multiplying. When we subtract this 3 to the other side, we're going to get a b value to equal 2. So now we're ready to write our equation. We know what the slope is. The slope is negative 3. So negative 3x, and then our y-intercept is a positive 2. We're going to write an equation of a line that passes through this point and has that slope. Well, we start right off with y equals mx plus b. This is your x, This is your y. Your slope is 3. Your x is 0. So we're going to have 2 equals 0 plus b. So 2 equals b. Well, we probably knew that just by looking at the point itself. This is on the y-axis. 0 for your x, 2 for your y. That is your y-intercept. So most likely you could go straight to writing 3x plus 2 if you understood where the placement of the points was with the graph. Well, with letter B it's not quite as simple, because this one crosses the x-axis at 3, has a height of 0 for the y, so that's why it's on the x-axis. It has a slope of 2. So what's our equation of the line? So this is our x and y. So we take y equals mx plus b. That's the equation of a line. So our x and y, the y is 0, the m is 2, the x is 3. So 0 equals 6 plus b. Subtract the 6 to the other side, and we get b to equal negative 6. So to write our equation, we need to know the slope, which is 2. We need to know the y-intercept, which is negative 6. Y equals mx plus b. Here's your x and y. Plug the 4, the half, the 2. We can take half of the 2 to get 1. Subtract that 1 to the other side, and b equals 3. So our final equation is y equals half x plus 3. Now we're going to be given a point, we're going to be given a line, and we need to figure out what line goes through this point parallel to this one. So I'll draw you a quick sketch of what's happening with this. At 1, 3, we have a point. At negative 2 and a slope of 2, I have a line. So I need to figure out what is the equation of the line that is parallel to the one that's given to us, but also goes through 1, 3. Okay? So it looks like it goes through the origin, but maybe my scale's off a little bit. We have to do the calculation. So we're going to take y equals mx plus b. This is my x and y, just like we did earlier. Now, for us to figure out the equation that is parallel, I need to use the same slope. My x is 1. So my y-intercept is actually 1. So my equation's going to have the same slope, but has a different y-intercept. Let's try that again on this side. We have a point and we have a line. We need to find out what line is parallel to that one that goes through this point. X and y, same slope, So y equals 4x minus 3. So on our next problem, we have an x and a y. We have a slope that equals -1. So y equals mx plus b. One equals 0 plus b, so b is 1. So our equation is y equals our slope, x. We don't typically write the 1, so -x, +1. We could check this by plugging in the x, so we have 0 plus 1 is going to equal 1. In this case, 4 times 2 is 8, minus 3 is 5. That equaled y. And for this last one, 1, 3, plug in 1 to get 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 equals your 3. It's a good way to check to see your work. On the back side, we're going to write an equation of a line that passes through this point and is perpendicular to the given line. So what we're looking for, in this case, we have the xy axis. We have a point that's 4 over 2 up. We have an equation that's 4 up and has a slope of rise up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. We need to come up with an equation that is perpendicular, that crosses that at 90 degrees. So to do that, we're going to start with y equals mx plus b. Get the plus in there. We know our x and y. Now our slope, our current slope, equals 1/2. Our perpendicular slope has to be the opposite reciprocal. So this is positive, so our perpendicular slope is going to be negative. You see that it's decreasing. Instead of 1 over 2, this is going to be 2 over 1, or you can just write 2. So our slope is going to be -2 with an x value of 4 plus b. 2 equals -8 plus b. Add the 8 across and we get a y-intercept that equals 10. So our final answer is -2x plus 10. And that makes some sense here. We have a negative slope, it's falling to the right, and it's going to cross much higher than where it currently is at a height of 2. The y-intercept is going to be considerably higher, which 10 would be. Here we have our x and the y. We'll start out with y equals mx plus b. Our y is -2. Our current slope is -1/3. So our perpendicular slope is going to be the reciprocal of that. Our x value is 3 plus our b. That's what we're trying to figure out. Where is this going to cross the x-axis? When you subtract 9, you get -11. So y equals 3x minus 11. Now, this letter C is going to be a bit trickier. This letter C, let's draw a picture to kind of demonstrate what's happening. We have this line up here at 2. It's a horizontal line because it's y equals 2. That's your equation of the line. It's not a dot. It's specifically a line. It's horizontal. It has a slope of 0. It crosses the y-axis. Now we have this point, -2, 6. Now we need to come up with an equation of a line that goes through that point and is perpendicular to our horizontal line. So what's perpendicular? Perpendicular, it has to form a right angle, straight up and down. So it has to be vertical. So I need to come like that. What is the equation for that? Well, it's 1, 2 over to get over here to -2, 6. It's got to be 2 over, and that's my vertical line. So x equals -2. We're going to graph this equation. -2x plus 4y equals 12. We first have to get it in y equals mx plus b form. Divide by 4. So we get y equals half x plus 3. So we're going to go up to 3. And we're going to do our slope of a half, which is up 1 over 2. And you want to do that till you get to the edge of the grid. And then you go down 1, backwards 2. Down 1, backwards 2, till you get to the edge of the grid. You should see the point should definitely be in a straight line. Then you should write the equation on your graph. Y equals half x plus 3. So here's our equation. It's in standard form because the x and the y are on the same side of the equal sign. We could graph it like that. It's not with a slope or a y-intercept necessarily, but we could plug in values to figure out where the y-intercept is, to figure out where the x-intercept is, and draw a line between them. But our typical way is to put it into slope-intercept form. So we're going to subtract the 4x to the other side. We'll divide by the 2 to get the x by itself. So now I have my equation. I go up to 4. I do my slope of -2. -2 could be written as -2 over 1. So rise is -2. Running is +1. -2, +1. -2, positive 1. Run it all the way to the edge of the grid. Then you can come up and go the other direction. +2, -1. And you'll see that that dot will place it in the same line as all the other points. And we write the equation of our line. Y equals -2x plus 4. Now we're going to try a few of our equations with slope, midpoint, and distance when we're working with some points that have variables. We don't know their specific location, but in terms of that pattern, we can still figure out what would be halfway between them, what is the slope of their lines, and things like that. So we'll start out with x1, y1, x2, y2. So our slope should be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's our equation for slope. So the slope is going to be 14d minus d, or 1d, 11b minus 1b. Now, a common mistake here is to cross the d's out, thinking that the d goes away. But there's 14 d's minus 1d, that gives you 13 d's. On the bottom, we get 11b minus 1b, gives you 10b. So notice here that y2 is this whole 4e minus c. It's both of those put together. So using our formula, we say that for the slope, 4e minus c minus, so that's y2 minus y1, all over x2 minus x1. So we have E, then we have two of these different C's. We can collect our like terms with the C's. So 4E, negative C minus 5 more C's gives me a negative 6C. On the bottom I have 2A minus 2A, which leaves us with 0. Anytime we have 0, we know that as long as it's in the denominator, we know that it's undefined. x1, y1, x2, y2. So our slope is 11b minus 3b over 5a minus 3a. Leaves me with 8b and 2a. My 2 is allowed to go into the 8 to get 4b, and the a would still stay on bottom. Number 9. We're looking for the midpoint. Well, the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2. You add the x's and divide by 2. y1 plus y2. Add the y's, divide by 2. So, label your points. So the midpoint is going to be 5a plus a over 2 and 7c plus c over 2. That leaves us with 6a over 2 and 8c over 2. So our final answer is going to be 3a and 4c. So 4e minus c minus 5c over 2a minus 2a. Well, we have 4e. Then we have 1c minus 5 more c's. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing slope. I'm supposed to be doing midpoint. Gotta stay focused. Midpoint. Take your x's, add them together, divide by 2. Take your y's and add them together. We don't need parentheses here because we're adding this quantity, so we're adding a 4e and we're adding a negative c. If it was subtraction, we would definitely need parentheses to distribute that negative through. So here we have 4a over 2. We have 5c minus a c, so that's 4c plus 4e. Now, of course, 4a can be reduced down to 2a when you divide that by 2. And when you're adding two terms together, the division has to be able to go into both terms. So 2 goes into 4 2 times, and the 2 goes into 4 2 times. x1, y1, x2, y2, 2a plus 5a over 2, 3b plus 1b over 2, 7a over 2, 4b over 2. Well, 7 divided by 2 can't be broken down. But 4 divided by 2 can be. The distance. The distance formula is x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. So if this is our x1, y1, x2, y2, our distance is going to be the square root of our x's subtracted. 5a minus 5a squared plus c minus 7c squared. We get 0 squared plus negative 6c squared. Well, 0 squared is 0. Negative 6 squared is 36. C squared is c squared. That comes out to be just 36c squared, which is just 6c. You can take the square root of 36. You can take the square root of c squared. There's no adding or subtracting right here, so it's okay to actually take the square root. So the distance, x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1, two a squared, 7b squared. That's going to end with 4a squared plus 49b squared. Now notice the b squared and a squared are different, so they cannot be added together. And there's a plus in there, so you can't take the square root of the 4, you cannot take the square root of the 49. That's all you can do. So x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1 leaves us with 3a squared and negative 2b squared. When you square 3a, you get 3a times 3a. Square the 3, square the a. Square the negative 2, square the b. So even though you can take the square root of each of these terms individually, because they're added together, you cannot take the square root of that. You can't get rid of the plus sign. Good luck on your quiz.